All right, today we're diving into the absolutely incredible story of Luxembourg. We're going to unpack how one of Europe's tiniest nations managed to survive for over 1,000 years, caught right between some of the biggest powers on the continent. I mean, seriously, just look at a map. Its very existence seems almost impossible, right? Luxembourg's story is this amazing tale of fortresses, empires, and just a remarkable will to survive. So let's get into it. The secret to Luxembourg's survival, really, it all goes back to what it was at its very core. It wasn't just a piece of land. It was a strategic stronghold, a fortress so powerful that it was nicknamed the Gibraltar of the North. Everybody wanted a piece of it. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with how that fortress came to be. Then, we'll see how it became a pawn for massive empires before finally forging its own identity. We'll also cover its brutal trials in two world wars, its stunning post-war comeback, and of course, where this little nation stands today. So, you might think a story like this starts with some epic battle, right? But nope. The story of Luxembourg actually begins with, well, a pretty straightforward real estate deal way back in the Middle Ages. So, way back in the year 963, a count named Siegfried I traded some land for an old Roman fort that was perched on this rocky cliff called the Balk. The fort's name was Luxembourg, which basically means little castle. And from this one small but incredibly strategic spot, a town, a county, and eventually a whole nation would grow. Now, for centuries, Luxembourg wasn't its own master. Not even close. Its location made it a super valuable chess piece on the European board, and it got passed around between the Bourbons, the Habsburgs, you name it. They all built up its fortress walls while completely controlling its destiny. And this is where you can really see just how much it was chipped away. Over almost 200 years, it was literally partitioned 3 different times. Its powerful neighbors, France, Prussia, and later Belgium, just kept carving off chunks of its territory. That third partition in 1839 was the absolute worst, handing over its biggest French-speaking region to the brand new country of Belgium. But here's the crazy thing. While these losses were, devastating, they had this totally unintended side effect. With each piece of land that was lost, the part that remained became more unique, more focused on its own shared culture, and ultimately more determined to be its own thing, to be uniquely Luxembourgish. So, ironically, all this loss actually helped create a nation. So, after the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars in the 19th century, Luxembourg's path to becoming a real nation it got complicated. It was technically independent, but the reality on the ground was way different. And this quote from a brutish visitor back in 1819 just sums it up perfectly. Think about how confusing this was. The King of the Netherlands was their head of state, the Grand Duke. But because Luxembourg was also part of the German Confederation, the fortress itself was occupied by a massive Prussian army, so you had one country with 2 different foreign powers running the show. Okay, so this crisis in 1867, this was a huge deal. France tried to buy Luxembourg from the Dutch king, but Prussia was having none of it, and it almost started a war. Instead, all the big powers met in London and hammered out a deal. The Prussian army would leave, the massive fortress walls would be torn down, and in exchange, Luxembourg's independence and its neutrality were guaranteed forever. It basically traded its military might for its actual sovereignty. A brilliant move. So once they had that independence locked in, they really started to build the idea of what it meant to be Luxembourgish. They started promoting their own language, Luxembourgish. They strengthened their shared Catholic identity. And then, in 1890, they finally ended that personal union with the Netherlands, which just meant they shared the same king, and established their very own exclusive royal family. But that hard-won national identity and its guaranteed neutrality, it was about to face the biggest test yet, the 20th century. And twice, Germany was going to roll right over that neutrality, putting the entire country's existence on the line. Now, both occupations were brutal, for sure, but the threat in World War II was on a whole other level. See, in the First War, the Luxembourgish government was actually allowed to stay. But in 1940, the Nazis didn't just invade. They forced the government and the beloved Grand Duchess Charlotte into exile. And then in 1942, they formally annexed the country into Germany. They tried to literally wipe Luxembourg off the map. To try and make this annexation look legitimate, the Nazis held a census in 1941. They asked three seemingly simple questions about citizenship, language, and ethnicity, fully expecting the answers to prove that Luxembourgers were really just Germans. Well, they were in for a big surprise. In what has to be one of the most incredible acts of mass civil disobedience you'll ever hear about, the people answered all three questions with just one word: Luxembourgish, or Luxembourgish. This powerful, unified act of resistance, which they called dreimal Luxembourgisch, or three times Luxembourgish, sent a crystal clear message. They were not German. They were, and they always would be, Luxembourgers. You know, having your country occupied twice in just a few decades teaches you some pretty hard lessons. And for Luxembourg, it led to a complete, radical shift in how it saw its place in the world. They realized that a piece of paper guaranteeing your neutrality means absolutely nothing when tanks are rolling across your border. Survival had to be an active game, not a passive one. So Luxembourg ditched its neutrality and went all in on a brand new strategy: deep, binding integration with its neighbors. And this new political strategy went hand in hand with a massive economic one. The country, which had been all about steel for ages, completely reinvented itself. They used their stability, their central location, and their trilingual workforce to become a global giant in banking and finance. So instead of trying to hide from its giant neighbors, Luxembourg's new motto was basically, if you can't beat them, bind yourself to them so tightly they can't get rid of you. It became a founding member of pretty much every major post-war European and international group you can think of. Its security no longer came from fortress walls, but from being an essential part of the whole European project. And all of this brings us to today, where you can really see the incredible payoff of that bold post-war strategy. I mean, just look at this. Today, Luxembourg is one of the richest and most stable countries on the entire planet. It's a truly international, trilingual society that hosts key EU institutions. And in a totally forward-thinking move, it became the first country in the world to make all public transportation completely free back in 2020. And there you have it, the remarkable story of how the little castles survived and absolutely thrived. If you enjoyed this deep dive, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button, and definitely check out our playlist of other quick country histories. From a strategic fortress to a global financial center and a key player in the European Union, Luxembourg has proven to be the ultimate survivor, time and time again, through constant reinvention. Which really just leaves us with one final thought: what will its next transformation be? Thanks for watching.